Since he was Sean Combs' Puff Daddy, people have been talking about him.
Developments still unfolding in the case of disgraced rapper P. Diddy in the months since the federal raids that sent shockwaves across the country.
So there's always been this kind of talk about him, but I think it wasn't until recently that people really started to hone in and focus on him.
But are criminal charges really on the way?
Anytime you see a raid of this nature, there's a expectation that something's coming. And I'll be frank with you, I still think something's coming.
What about the status of the federal investigation?
For a lot of the allegations that we're talking about with regards to P. Diddy are years and years ago, which means they're potentially doing investigations that from years back till now, that takes time.
And how does Lil Rod's lawsuit play into all of this?
He kind of opened a Pandora's box to say, even if you don't believe what happened back then, I have a potential treasure trove of information as to what happened now.
In the 1 month since federal search warrants were executed at 2 of P. Diddy's homes, his case has dominated the news. But the puzzling part of the story is just that. So far, there's no criminal charges against him at all. I asked Law&Crime legal analyst Julie Rendelman about this. What were you thinking when you first heard that P. Diddy, this rapper who's been renowned for decades, had a federal warrant served at 2 of his properties?
So I think myself, like anyone, thought that a federal indictment was coming fairly quickly. Anytime you see a raid of this nature, there's a expectation that something's coming. And I'll be frank with you, I still think something's coming. I think it's just actually going to potentially take more time. I think we all forget that some of the items that were recovered from there were computers, we've been told. And if there are computer items that are recovered, it's going to take time to evaluate them forensically. If there were other items, they may need time to evaluate them, investigate them. There might be DNA. There could be a whole slew of things. And they also potentially can be still interviewing witnesses and potential subjects of this case to make sure if they're going to go forward that they're going to have the strongest case possible.
Homeland Security searched 2 of Diddy's homes on March 25th, one on Star Island in Miami and the other in Holmby Hills, California. That's really when all eyes turned to Diddy, but the shocking allegations against him came months before.
And I think it started probably with Cassie's lawsuit. I think that's when people started to make the comparison between P. Diddy and what was going on and what happened with R. Kelly. I still think it's always a shock when you suddenly see a federal warrant coming down. But I definitely think there was discussions that were coming as this came about.
The lawsuit Julie is referring to is this one, brought on by Cassandra Ventura last November. You probably know her as the singer Cassie, who dated Diddy for years. In her bombshell lawsuit, Cassie lays out very serious claims against Diddy, including that he physically abused her, raped her, forced her to have sex with prostitutes, and recorded it. Cassie laid out the dynamics of their relationship too, saying she met Diddy when she was just 19 years old and he was 37. During that time, Diddy began, quote, almost immediately asserting possession and control over her and inserting himself into all aspects of her career and her personal life. What's important about Cassie's lawsuit is that it was the first to bring these serious accusations against Diddy. It was also settled very quickly, just 1 day after it was filed. What do you make of that quick settlement?
Look, I'm gonna use the party line by saying, from P. Diddy's perspective, there's no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. People do NDAs all the time. They settle lawsuits all the time. From an outside perspective, at least how it appears is, someone looking, if we're analyzing it, we're thinking, what in the world did he not want her to say? What in the world was he hiding? Because this was an incredibly, incredibly quick resolution of this case, and much quicker than anyone anticipated.
Because Cassie's allegations date back to the early 2000s, she filed a civil suit under the New York Survivors Act that allowed survivors of sexual assault to file civil suits against their alleged predators, even if the statute of limitations had expired. 3 other women also filed suit under the New York Survivor Act: Joy Dickerson Neal, Liza Gardner, and a woman identifying herself only as Jane Doe. These lawsuits sought eerily similar allegations against Diddy. Joy Dickerson Neal says Diddy raped her in New York in the early 90s when she was a student at Syracuse University. She also says Diddy recorded this rape and passed around that tape to other people. Liza Gardner says Diddy and another person raped her in New York in the 90s too. She also alleges Diddy became so irate with her after the rape that he choked her to the point that she lost consciousness. Then there's Jane Doe, whose accusations bring us into the 21st century. She says Diddy raped her in New York in 2003 when she was only 17 years old. Her lawsuit includes photographs of her and Diddy at his recording studio. The bottom line of all these lawsuits, they echo the accusations brought on by Cassie. Could those additional 3 lawsuits corroborate what she was saying?
Certainly, again, I hate to keep comparing it to R. Kelly, but this is exactly how the R. Kelly case came about. Different individuals coming forward to make their claims in regards to acts. In that case, it was R. Kelly. Here it's P. Diddy. And it's not just P. Diddy, it's other individuals that surround P. Diddy. And so let's be clear. I think the feds, when they're evaluating this case, they're not just evaluating what's recovered inside of his home, but they're going to be reviewing and interviewing each and every individual that is willing to speak to them to see whether or not they corroborate and support each other that crimes in fact happened.
So we've talked a lot about those lawsuits that were filed back in November. There were 4 back then. And then another lawsuit, the huge one filed by Lil Rod, Rodney Jones, was filed in February. This one's almost 100 pages and lays out a long list of accusations and even lists some celebrities. What do you make of Lil Rod or Rodney Jones's lawsuit?
So his is a bit different. And the reason is that this is not a look back case where we're talking about events that potentially happened years and years before. He's describing alleged incidents that happened allegedly quite recently. And so he kind of opened a Pandora's box to say, even if you don't believe what happened back then, I have a potential treasure trove of information as to what happened now. And he's saying, it's not just my word, I have video. Evidence. There are other witnesses potentially that are involved. Now, obviously, P. Diddy and his team is going to go after the credibility of this individual. They're going to say, well, he's been in trouble in the past, and raise those issues to say he's not reliable now. But again, I don't want to say it opens the floodgates, but starting with Cassie, starting with all these other civil suits, and now we have something so recent that may have video support. Is something I'm sure the feds are going to be looking at very carefully.
So in the Cassie case, we know it was settled. Obviously, we don't know what the numbers look like, but likely a pretty large settlement there. And then he has 4 additional civil suits. So if he does decide to settle, could his bank account take a pretty large hit?
Any settlements that Sean Combs enters into would certainly not leave him destitute. Based on, again, we're all guessing, but the homes he owns and whatever other business ventures he's been involved in, that he has plenty of money to afford to pay whatever lawsuits he needs to, and to continue with what he would view as the best criminal defense attorneys out there.
If you are representing Diddy, what do you suggest as far as those 4 other civil suits that are pending right now, that he tries to settle them?
So that's a great question with not an easy answer. The problem is even if he settles, those individuals can still be interviewed by the feds. So I'm not sure that you're gaining anything except perhaps some good favor, because now the person has been paid. And so you're in a tough situation. Also, don't forget, it may be possible that we're at a stage right now where negotiations have stopped or slowed down because of the potential for this criminal liability coming down the path.
If Cassie's lawsuit piqued public interest in Diddy, Lil Rod's lawsuit sent it into overdrive. That's because the 74-page suit doubled down on accusations brought by earlier civil suits and even brought new allegations too. Lil Rod worked as a producer on Diddy's Love album starting back in 2022. He says Diddy forced Lil Rod to live with him for months on end, during which time Diddy sexually assaulted Lil Rod repeatedly. Lil Rod says he witnessed many illegal activities and claims to have proof. He even included some screenshots in the filing. And according to the lawsuit, there's hundreds of hours of video footage. So as you mentioned, there are photos, allegedly, audio recordings, videos, and that's likely what investigators are looking for. So as you alluded to before, if there are hundreds of hours, could it be taking quite a while for these federal investigators to go through every single piece of evidence?
Absolutely. I think it is going to take some time to evaluate this. And remember, on top of everything, you're talking about the recovery of computers. You're also talking about potential. And again, this is potential allegations of sex trafficking. They're going to be wanting to look at text messages, emails, Google searches. There could be a plethora of things that they're looking for to potentially tie this P. Diddy in, and again, other individuals that either worked with him or lived in the house or had access to those computer devices.
Lil Rod's lawsuit also name drops several celebrities, including Prince Harry, Cuba Gooding Jr., and Jennifer Lopez. The Prince Harry reference is almost a throwaway line, but Jennifer Lopez's mention is more noteworthy. The lawsuit says that back in 1999, during the New York nightclub shooting, quote, Mr. Combs' girlfriend at the time, Jennifer Lopez, aka J-Lo, carried the gun into the club for him and passed him the gun after he got into an altercation with another individual. Diddy, J-Lo, and rapper Shine were all arrested in connection to the shooting that injured 3 people. J-Lo's charges were ultimately dropped, but both Diddy and Shine went to trial. Diddy was acquitted, but Shine was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison before he was deported to his home country of Belize. Then, Lil Rod's lawsuit brings up Cuba Gooding Jr. According to the suit, Lil Rod alleges Diddy was, quote, grooming him to pass him off to his friends. This fear became reality when Mr. Combs introduced Mr. Jones to Cuba Gooding Jr. while they were on Mr. Combs' yacht. There's even pictures of this interaction too, showing both Cuba and Diddy together, and later Cuba smirking as his arm is around Lil Rod. Court docs go on to state, quote, Cuba Gooding Jr. began touching, groping, and fondling Mr. Jones's leg, his upper inner thighs near his groin, the small of his back near his buttocks, and his shoulders. Back in 2019, Cuba was booked on misdemeanor charges of forcible touching and sexual abuse after allegedly groping a woman in Times Square. By the next year, 3 women had come forward, accusing him of non-consensual sexual touching. He eventually reached a deal with prosecutors that required 6 months of counseling, but no jail time.
Well, keep in mind, a lot of the name dropping is simply that, name dropping. And I think the reason that they were included is not because, for example, Jennifer Lopez is facing criminal liability now, but that P. Diddy accessed these famous people almost to cover himself. He would surround himself by individuals to give himself legitimacy. And so I'm not sure that necessarily the people that are being mentioned. Gooding Jr. may be a little different. He's already faced his own issues, and not to delineate him, but he and others may be distinguishable from, for example, when we start to talk about Prince Harry, because there's no allegations that Prince Harry did anything wrong. It's really just describing the relationships and how he allegedly covered his tracks.
In regards to the A-list celebs that are listed there, or even an additional plaintiff, if we're talking about Cassie, we already know that Cassie is working with the feds. That's kind of been widely reported. But as far as Jennifer Lopez goes, or any of the other celebrities listed, or any associates that weren't listed who could be friends with P. Diddy, is it possible that the feds have contacted them and asked for more information?
I'm sure they're going to make every effort to speak to every individual that had any knowledge whatsoever of this individual, even way back when. Someone like Jennifer Lopez, I'm sure she has her own attorney team that are going to do their best effort to prevent her from being interviewed and to keep her away from this case, because she got a lot of attention way back when he was arrested in regards to the original gun case of which he was acquitted. But yeah, I think they're going to be trying to review and speak every person that might have any knowledge of any type of criminal wrongdoing on the part of this individual.
And it's interesting because, as you said, criminal wrongdoing, a lot of that was alleged in Lil Rod's lawsuit. But as of now, we don't have any criminal charges, but some very serious allegations. I mean, sex trafficking, gun trafficking, drugging people, underage girls, a laundry list of things that Diddy apparently orchestrated. So, what sort of charges could he face if those are coming down the pipeline?
So again, I hate to keep bringing up R. Kelly, but inevitably everyone is, because this path is so similar to what we saw with R. Kelly. And so if the trajectory is in any way the same, we're guessing there may be some sex trafficking charges as well as racketeering.
In the days after the federal raids at Diddy's properties, we saw the arrest of his alleged drug mule, Brendan Paul. Brendan Paul is not a defendant in Lil Rod's lawsuit, but is described as the person who, quote, acquires and distributes Mr. Combs' drugs and guns. He was arrested in Florida while trying to board Diddy's plane. He faces charges of felony cocaine possession, and just this week, he pleaded not guilty. But is it possible that we could see additional charges for people around Diddy now that they're kind of under the microscope, so to speak?
Absolutely. And we see this all the time. Sometimes we have individuals that are cooperating. We won't necessarily know that they're cooperating until much further down the line. And don't forget, Sarah, there might be people that have already been arrested and are cooperating now that we haven't been told about. So yes, it is very possible that that is what's going on or what may happen in the future.
Meanwhile, Julie says Diddy's defense team is likely hard at work.
Well, I think that there's two things going on. I think there's the PR part of it, and then there's the actual defense part of it. And the PR part of it is what we expect, is to spin things, is to start putting out articles saying this is why this person is incredible. This person has a prior criminal record. And then in terms of the defense strategies, it's finding things about those individuals that would raise issues of credibility, and then sometimes providing them to the investigators to say, these are reasons why you cannot rely on them to go forward with such a serious accusation.
And I've heard a lot of different guesses from you, other attorneys that I've interviewed, experts about if and when these charges or indictments could be coming down. Do you have any sort of timetable or any sort of guess what that could look like?
I don't. We've seen cases come down a month later. We've seen cases come down a year later. And so remember, a lot of the allegations that we're talking about with regards to P. Diddy are years and years ago, which means they're potentially doing investigations that from years back till now. That takes time. And it wasn't until November at the minimum that we at least started to know about these civil suits. Now, could the feds have been investigating this before? Perhaps, or they could have started once all these civil suits came to be.
Let's pause this P. Diddy story for a quick second to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's Law and Crime news package. It's stories like this that remind you you never know what's going to happen, and the world is an unpredictable place. So when you're hurt, it can be confusing, it can be scary, and you don't really know where to turn. Well, enter Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. You can submit a claim in 8 clicks or less on your phone and find out if you have a case. If you do, your injury could be worth millions. In the past couple of months, they've gotten verdicts of $12 million in Florida, $26 million in Philadelphia, and $6.8 million in New York. Also, they have over 1,000 lawyers, so you know you'll be in good hands. So if you're interested, you can start by easily submitting a claim at www.forthepeople.com/LCnews or by dialing #law. That's #529 on your phone. All right, let's get back to that story. But if a federal indictment does come down, what could we expect? If and when an arrest does come for P. Diddy, Sean Combs, what would that look like?
So my expectation is, if in fact they were going to make an arrest, two things could happen. One is they could just pick him up without warning him. The other option, which seems usually a bit more likely, is that they would coordinate a turn-in with his attorney or attorneys. Sometimes they would require the individual to turn in their passport. They might discuss what a bail package would look like. It depends on how serious the allegations are as to whether or not they're willing to negotiate that.
Is it possible that based on what we're hearing, these allegations, and if he was in fact charged on those allegations, that he could be held without bail or bond?
Anything is possible. Again, the issue really is about what those charges are. He does have tons of money. He has access and the ability to, we know, travel. He has access and the ability to potentially travel outside of the country. So the feds, if in fact that there is something coming down the pike, they certainly are not going to want to be in a position to have him suddenly leave the country and they can't get him back.
And if he does go to trial federally, I mean, there are a lot of different survivors or victims in this case. There's a lot of accusations over many, many years, 3 decades, if not more, potentially. So could it be a lengthy trial when, if it does go to trial?
If in fact we're dealing with the trial of Sean Combs, I'm confident it's going to be a trial that everyone's paying attention to, and it's going to be a lengthy trial. Because remember, I expect that if they are in fact going forward, they have plenty of evidence that they're going to use to make sure he's found guilty.
In recent weeks, Lil Rod's team has filed a summons giving Diddy and the other defendants 21 days to respond to the civil suit. Because as of now, we haven't heard anything from Diddy or his team. We've only gotten statements like this one in regards to the federal raids. Quote, "There is no excuse for the excessive show of force and hostility exhibited by authorities or the way his children and employees were treated." A short statement was also released about Lil Rod's lawsuit. Quote, "His reckless name dropping about events that are pure fiction and simply did not happen is nothing more than a transparent attempt to garner headlines. We have overwhelming, indisputable proof that these claims are complete lies." Diddy's most recent comment was way back in December of last year. He posted it to social media and it reads, quote, "Enough is enough. For the last couple of weeks, I've sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth." It seems like this is a case everyone is following and everyone is talking about, but why haven't we heard from P. Diddy himself?
It seems to me that Sean Combs is doing the one thing that many other individuals that are in the spotlight that are potentially facing criminal charges don't do, and that is keep their mouth shut. He's doing exactly what he should be doing, not speaking out in public, not speaking in any type of media forum, letting his attorneys do the work, and staying silent.
Julie says she believes federal charges are on the way for Diddy, but it makes sense why they haven't come just yet. I'm assuming that prosecutors are going to wait until they have all of their ducks in a row before they bring the charges, just to make sure that there's something that would stick. So is that a reason why things could be taking longer rather than them just rushing to indict?
So, yes, remember when the feds take on a case, they do not like to lose. I mean, no one likes to lose, but they want their ducks, as you said, in a row. They want their case airtight. And by the way, don't forget, I'm confident that attorneys for P. Diddy are reaching out because they don't want anything coming down the pike. And they would like to find ways to avoid that as well, or put something on their radar to say, this person's not credible, this person's not credible, this is the reason why you shouldn't believe that person. So I think any type of real federal investigation takes time.
It's been 1 month since the federal raids were executed, and there's still no sign of the case slowing. We'll bring you all the latest Diddy news and updates as they unfold. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.